years, can you come up with a definition of service? Just out of curiosity, who thinks they could come up with a definition of a service that would reliably differentiate between products and services? What do you think? Is that hard or easy? Michael's gone, no, I don't know, man. Not too sure. Okay, it's kind of a trick question. The question of how do you differentiate between products and services has been something that's been debated in the world's best business schools for more than 50 years. And there have been all sorts of different theories, different approaches. You know, the idea that services are intangible and products are tangible. One said, here's a simple definition, you cannot own a service. But in fact, that's wrong. There are services that you can own. Some say, well, there needs to be some human interaction for each service. That's incorrect as well. If you think about data processing, you know, Microsoft has server farms that take up like 50 acres, and there's only a dozen people that work there. Or services are enduring, or services are ephemeral. So let me, and by the way, I don't find any of these useful in terms of day-to-day decision making. Let me show you a better one. This is called unified services theory. This came out of researchers that were working jointly in hospitality and healthcare. And their goal was to make it unified, that it would cover every type of service and every type of product that it possibly could be. And what UST tells us is, here's how you define a product. To buy a product, the buyer has to provide two things to the seller. Oh, and there's a word wrong in my slide. The buyer has to provide two things to the seller. They have to provide final selection. They have to pay for it. In other words, I go into a clothing store, I say, I'd like that red shirt. Here's my money, and the shirt is mine. And you'll see that that two-step process works with any product. Final selection and payment. It doesn't matter if I'm buying a 50-cent Apple or a $5,000 Apple laptop. We're talking about 4 orders of magnitude difference in price. All I have to do is choose and pay, and that's all that's needed to buy any product. With services, on the other hand, what UST says is that to buy a service, the buyer must provide 3 things to the seller. They have to choose it, final selection. They have to pay for it. But then there's a third thing, service inputs. And service inputs are one of 3 things: the possessions, a person's information, or simply their person. And in other words, the service inputs, those are the things that the service is performed on. And there's only 3 categories. Possession, in other words, my tailor can't hem my pants until I take him my pants. It's your person, your physical person, or if you're a company, your corporate entity. In other words, my dentist, she can't work on my teeth until I go to visit her. Or there's information. My accountant can't do my taxes until I bring my T-slips and my receipts. So those are the 3 things. Products are 2 things, services are 3 things. So if you want to reliably differentiate between a product and service, you ask, can I get value without providing service inputs? And if the answer is yes, then it's a product. And if the answer is no, then it's a service. And that's a rule as hardcore as the definition of a mammal. And by the way, if you think you have an exception, please write to me. I would love to see it. And I'm sure there's a student somewhere that would like to do a PhD thesis on that one example. There's a corollary to that for you as people that sell services. We talk about, can I make a sale without getting services input? And if I if I can make the sale and don't ever have to get services input, it means that I'm selling a product. But if in order to make a sale, I must get some agreement to provide services input, then it means that I am selling a service. Now, not all services need to get, this is confusing. This is the confusing part, if you're not confused yet. It's actually a big topic, which is why I wrote a book, because what you find as you get into it is that the concept of services inputs affects every aspect of business management, everything from the advertising to how you sell, from cold calling. And I'm talking about somebody who sold business-to-business services to some of the biggest companies that did that for 20 years. There's human resource issues, things at the back end like forecasting and tracking that are all affected. That was why I wrote the book. As I said, we're giving away a few. If all 30 people have shown up, it would have been a competition, but I'm pretty sure you're all going to get a book out of this one way or the other. Right, Mac? So let me give you an example. I'm making a claim here that every aspect of business is different. Let me give you an example. This is based on research that I did. I looked at over 700 direct response ads that were in 50 different verticals. So they were all business to business. They were all trying to get business. They were direct response. A direct response ad is the kind where you're trying to get somebody to commit at that moment to go make a purchase. And what I found is that 90% of product ads have a call to action, but fewer than 30% of pure service ads have a call to action. And that's because it's very difficult to compel somebody to buy when you must wait for service inputs. So that would be a single example. And as I said, the book is filled with that, and as well as strategies to cope with it. So a minute ago, excuse me one second, I'm just going to. And
oh, David, you're on mute.
I said you can tell I'm a professional because I'm sipping from a gigantic cup of water. So I used this term a minute ago, pure services, and I differentiate those from productized services. Now I don't know exactly whose company offers what, but there's a profound difference between selling services and productized services, in that productized services, you actually can say buy now, they've been productized. So I'll just give you a brief explanation of what that means and how you do that, how you productize them. So this is from a carpet website. This is an actual website. And if you look closely, I'm going to zoom in for you. You'll see they offer two pricing structures for carpet cleaning. They can give you a price where they say, we'll do 2 rooms, a maximum of 340 square feet for $120. But if it's not delineated like that, they say call for a free quote. And the issue here is, do you need to get service inputs once or twice to make your sale? In some cases, you have to get it just to give a price. So for example, if you are an architectural firm and you're designing a bridge, you can't just design a bridge. You need to know, is it for pedestrians or for trucks? What's the span? There's all these things that you need to know just in order to write your proposal. Then once you've written the proposal, if you win the business, then you can actually provide the service, and then the customer provides you with other things like access to the land would be an example of service inputs in that situation. So when we differentiate between productized services and regular services, the issue is, do I need to get a service inputs just to make a quote? And if you look here, you can see, you know what the price is. There's an offer being made, 2 rooms for $120. It's pretty straightforward. So as a strategy, if your company offers a service, which I think most of you do, and I find about 30% of the people who come to hear me speak are actually, they're themselves business consultants, and they say, I do a great job, my clients love me, I just don't know how to get more. One of the strategies that you might use is to try to come up with a productized offering. So productized offerings are services where the vendor has, I call it define and constrain. It's a one-step process. You take what you do, you define what you're going to offer, and then you make no changes, right? So if you think about here, whoop, they were pretty clear. If it's not 2 rooms, 340 square feet, you do not qualify. You have to call for a quote. So within your work, define and constrain, and then you can sell your service in the same way that a product is sold. If you'd like to see an example of that, you can look at my 2 websites. There's servicereboot.com and one more, goodclient.com. Excuse me, 1 minute. There we go. Service Reboot is my regular consulting company, and I help companies, for example, that are trying to make the transition from going from products to, they'd rather, instead of selling products one at a time, they'd like to work on a subscription model. And in fact, every single project that I do is different. So I offer that through Services Reboot. Now, one of the things that I got a lot of calls on was, well, will you train our sales staff to sell services? And so I said, sure. And I just created a module on that. And I started a second website, onemoregoodclient.com. Onemoregoodclient.com is a series of seminars and practice sessions that teaches professionals how to develop their client base. And you can go to onemoregoodclient.com and you can click a button and pay your money and sign up for a class. And it's completely productized. And so I can sell it like products. So Service Reboot, I have to, and again, I would recommend this model to any one of you, is if you have a website that is very, very generalized. I remember one website I was on last night, one of your websites, it says, every engagement is different. We customize our offering to our client. Is come up with something that you can say, hey, buy this today. And you'd be surprised at how much revenue you can generate from something like that. Okay, so that's the end of the theory part, okay? So we talked about services, we talked about productized services, and now let's talk about what a service provider has to do and some of their challenges. So as an example, I was in a client's office. This was an engineering firm that had, through a lawsuit, acquired a building that they had worked on and now owned a restaurant within the building. It was the weirdest thing. And I'm in their lobby, and this guy comes in and he says, hey, good to see you today. I'm Bill from the chicken factory, and we've got a special on chicken today. And he launched and he said, boneless, skinless chicken breasts are being sold today only for half pay, blah, 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 blah. And he launched into his pitch, right? And you can't really do that when your offering is very esoteric, where it's a thinking thing, or where you're offering expertise. Go one down. So what I want to talk to you about is what you can do, since you can't just start blabbing about your chickens, is what you can do in that situation where you meet somebody that you've never met before, and it turns out that they might be a good client. So let's talk about the mechanics of that. So serendipity, we call this the Serendipity Module. That occurs, that's when something happens by chance. You're not expecting it, but it's not bad luck, it's good luck. And so that's what makes it serendipitous, is it's a happy event that occurs purely by chance. And I know people who go out of their way to try to make that luck happen. Let me ask you, have any of you ever gone to like a trade show in the hopes of meeting clients, or, and I don't mean set up a booth, I mean just to attend, go to the lectures, hoping, you have done it, right? Or have you, I have a good friend of mine actually in Albany, New York. He's got a technology company. And he told me once about a third of his week is spent golfing with strangers, just in the hopes that one of the, he comes, he's part of a foursome, 3 other people, one is a client, and then there's 2 strangers. And he says that's where the biggest part of his business comes from, is just he's putting himself in that situation to meet a stranger. Or maybe you volunteered. So Cornelia, I see you nodding. Have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever tried anything like that? No. Oh, your mute's on. Are you able to turn your mute off?
Yes. Not for myself, but in previous jobs, of course, that was like, trade shows and professional gatherings and wherever, or you would set up whatever seminars to meet strangers or to invite strangers, and then you just jump on them.
And you jump on them, right. Now, if you have a booth at a trade show, then that's a little bit different, because if they come to your booth, you know that they're interested. But if you've gone to see the keynote speaker and you're sitting next to somebody, it can be a long walk in terms of going from what a nice speaker this is to how much money can I take from your company, right? There's a big gap there. So let's talk about how to make that transition professionally. I'm going to break this down for you as clearly as possible. Remember, if you're selling a service, you must get something from them. You must get those service inputs. So I'd like you to think in terms of getting stuff from them in this dialogue, rather than just blabbing about what it is you do. We're the 3rd largest such and such, or this and that. Don't do that. You're trying to get something from them. So here's the 3-step process. First of all, you have to state that you're interested in working with them. And then you explain the connection between your company and theirs. What is it that makes you think you should be working with them? And by the way, if the connection is they have a really big budget to spend and your company really needs the money, That's not a good hook to try to use, okay? You want to have some relationship there. And then finally, and this is the most important step, ask what their process is for considering new suppliers. Let me give you an example. I'm talking to Prakash. We've just had lunch together. We've both enjoyed our rubber chicken. We've heard the speaker speak. And I say, Prakash, we're real fans of your company's work. We'd love a chance to work with your team. I read in an industry journal that your company's in growth mode. And there's some new directions that you're putting into place. What our firm does is we work with executives to smooth those transitions when implementing strategic change. Now, instead of saying at this point, could I talk to you sometime about you becoming one of our clients, I ask about their process, and that changes the whole dynamic of the conversation. Prakash, if we wanted to be considered by your team, what would be the best way for us to introduce ourselves? Okay, and then at that point, Prakash will answer. Always, I promise you, because one of two things: either they do have a formal situation in place, and he'll just, excuse me one second. Hold on, my mute button on this thing. So it's one of two things. Either they do, in fact, have a formal process for considering suppliers, in which case he'll just tell you what it is, or they don't, and he doesn't want you to know that, because every company should have a process in place for considering these suppliers. So some of the things that I've seen is they'll say, well, you have to come in, we'll get your team to come in and present in person, or they'll say, well, we have an annual vendor fair, new vendor fair, you can come set up a table, which I thought was really cool. I've been invited to deliver a lunch and learn. Any weird ones that you guys have seen in the past? No? Basically, it's always something though, right? They tell you what it is, and then that becomes the opening that you can walk through. So let me give you another example. Part one, our firm would like to be considered to the work that you outsource. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but we're the largest subcontractor for Latinx installations in the state. There's the connection. What is your process for considering new suppliers? Is there something like a new vendor fair we could participate, or a lunch and learn? Maybe it's some dreadful process and people always laugh when I say this one. Maybe it's some dreadful process through your procurement department that we could work through. And then they always answer. They say, well, we do have an annual new vendor fair. And now the natural thing is for you to say, well, how do I get more information about that? Whatever it is, how do I get more information? And they go, well, call me, and here's the card, right? You want to see one more? I think there's another one. Don't say, can I call to discuss, right? You want to have, you want to have them tell you what the process is, and then follow through on that. Oh, if you want to become a new vendor, you have to talk to Judy Jones. Great, how do I reach Judy Jones? Well, why don't you call me next week and I'll give you her number. Oh, can I have your card? That's very different than finishing the lunch, turning to the person and saying, hey, we'd love to work with your team. Could I get your card to call you sometime to talk about doing work for you? They're always going to give you the card, but you're no further ahead. You're still a stranger. Or in this case, they're giving you the card because they have a process with you underway. Whether that process is setting up a lunch and learn or inviting you in to present about your work. And I have used this selling everything from engineering services to market research, big companies and small. I use this asking about process at a trade show that I was sent to where I had just been hired. I didn't have the booth. There was no booth. And so I sat in the food area and I asked people, I just introduced myself and I said, I don't really know very much about Kellogg's. Do you have a process that I could, follow for considering new suppliers? And I got one business card after another, and, people were happy to talk to me. And I actually had a competitor come over and introduce herself. And she said, I've got that big booth over there. We've been watching you in the booth, our whole team. And we think you're getting more business cards than we are. And there's a difference between saying to somebody, I would like to sell you something. Can I have your card so I can pursue that? And asking them about their process. So that's the basic trick, okay? So 3 steps. state clearly you want to work with them, explain why you should legitimately be allowed to be working with them, and then finally ask them about their process. So what I'm going to do is some exercises now. How long do we have here? Perfect, about 20 minutes till the end of the hour. So let's do this. Grab a sheet of paper and a pen. I'm going to set up a timer and give you a few minutes to work. Just list 3 companies that you would like to have as a client, and where there's a natural fit for their work. If you want to take a second and Google up to see what that commonality is, you can do that and just write down the companies. I'll give you 2 minutes to do that, and I'm going to stand here and look like a stern professor at the front of the classroom and give you folks a chance to work. Some people don't look like they're writing. And if you get all 3, raise your hand so I'll know and we'll move on. I won't wait till the end of the 2 minutes. Just 3 companies in your area that you might run into somebody on the street that you think there's a natural fit. Does anybody have 3 or has chosen not to do it at all? If you have 3, raise your hand. As I said, we'll move on. Or if you're not doing it at all, raise your hand. I won't be offended. This is more for you than for me. I'm really good at this. So you're okay, Cornelia? Ben, it's still writing. Michael? You have 2, or that's go ahead? Okay.
David, we do have some comments in the chat. Some
Sure.
people are listing the comments.
Let's hear. Questions, comments? Yeah, let's hear.
And Sherry actually does bring up a good point about COVID, hampers the traditional serendipity meeting.
Right, right. So what do you do about COVID? Okay, and I understand that completely. When I launched One More Good Client in February, on February 1st of this year, my value proposition was, hi, you don't know me. I'd like to fly in from another country and spend 2 days in a closed office with your most promising young employees. It took me a long time to figure out what I needed to do was to teach remotely and to get set up with the plants and the lights and everything. So what I would say is this technique of asking them about what they do, about what their process is equally good on the phone. So if you want to phone somebody up and say, hi, Judy, my name is David Selch. I'm calling from Service Reboot. We work with firms to help their professionals become better at the business development process. If we wanted to be considered as a trainer for your company, I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about your process internally for considering a new supplier and what we would have to do to introduce ourselves. Now, if you think about it, I just introduced myself, but I did it in a way where I'm kind of asking her a favor, and that changes the dynamic of the conversation. Okay, so this is something that works equally well over the phone. I've tried it over email, and frankly, it did not work. But what I will say is that part of the reason that it didn't work was because I was contacting the most senior people at the biggest companies, and I believe that the emails were simply not getting through at all, and I think that was the problem. Having said that, I've used this approach in person with very senior people at very big companies, and it did work. But what I would say is if you the idea of calling somebody or reaching out to them and saying, can you tell me about your process? We'd like to be considered. I don't want to be a jerk here and just start yabbering about my work. You know, I'm not trying to interrupt your day. I'm just calling to find out what your process is. What's the best way from your end for us to introduce ourselves? That's taking the same approach and choosing it by phone. I suspect it would work by email if it was somebody. That is true. I've used this in contacting law firms, larger law firms where they might have 100 lawyers on staff, and the managing partner that's responsible for profitability of the firm. I have reached out via email using that same approach. So I know it does work in certain situations via email as well. And one day, hopefully, COVID will be over. But in the meantime, telephone, email. Okay. Oh, was there another question, Mac, about that? Mac seems to be frozen. Okay. Yeah, Mac, was there another question that somebody wanted to ask?
No, I don't think there was another question. Just Jeffrey just listed some companies he had. I don't know if people want to share.
Oh, okay. Does anybody want to share? I'll give a book to somebody who shares. I'm just curious. Is anybody? No? Who's not shy? Who's got a good list? Bennett, did you raise your hand, or I'm looking around the camera? Yeah. No?
I'm typing.
You're typing. Okay,
Yeah.
That's fine. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of the exercise. All right. What I'd like you to do is, for each company that's on your list, create a statement of interest that sounds like you. This is where you say, I'd like to work with your company. All right. Now, the reason I say it has to sound like you is that, like, I had a client once, and she was great. She was over the top enthusiastic about everything. And she'd say, oh, we would love to be working with you, right? And frankly, I'm a completely different person. Based on the enthusiasm in her voice, I can tell you, I don't love my kids that much. I mean, I'm just not that kind of person. You know, I'm more like the kind who would say, you know, I can see synergies between our two firms engaging with each other in some sort of dialogue. I would never say we'd love to work with you guys. So what I'd like you to do is, for each of the 3 companies that you listed, take a minute, I'll give you another 2 minutes, and write down a statement of interest that sounds like you, right? We'd like to be considered for future projects, or we would love to be considered, or maybe it's specific to their work. Like we talked about, there's a company who had registered for this program who provides flamingo dancers to corporate events. Maybe what you want to say something like, we'd love to be involved with your events, right? We'd love to be providing entertainment for your next corporate function. So take a few minutes and write down something that's relevant to you. And again, I'll give you just a couple minutes. All right, enough with the dead air. I'm going to stop this here. This is actually interesting, Matt. The way I have my screen set up, the only people that I'm aware of are the few people that are sharing video. I didn't realize there's there's a fair number of people on the call. I just learned that this second while I was perusing around on the screen. So that's excellent. So when you said Jeffrey asked, I thought, who's Jeffrey? I don't see Jeffrey. So that's why. Okay. So and this is now also for the people who are on mute and there's no picture. What I'd like to do is give away another copy of my book. And if I can get a volunteer to have somebody read out loud what they've written, that would be great. Like if you want to put your hand up or flag Mac with a note in the chat box saying, hey, you know, I'd like to read this. I'd like to hear this.
Okay, I got Jeffrey. You want to unmute yourself, Jeffrey?
Is that Jeffrey Lee?
It is, in fact, Jeffrey Lee.
How are you today?
I'm good. So the three companies that I put down on my list were Amazon, Squarespace, and Audible.
Mm-hmm.
And what I put down as my statement of interest with them is I've built vibrant and engaged audiences and communities for entertainment brands like Marvel and StarTalk, and I feel I could do the same for your properties specifically and brands generally.
Okay. So that's kind of the linking, right? That's kind of like point number 2. You're explaining why there's a fit between your companies, right?
Correct.
At some point in there, you have to say, I want to work with you guys. Say, I stopped you today because I think there's a synergy between our work and I'd like to work with you. I've created vibrant audiences for Marvel and whatever it was you said in there, you know, your statement of value proposition. And that was great. You know, you have a really good elevator script. Just, you have to say, make clear, I'm having this conversation because I want to work with you. Okay, that's what I would say is add that in, right? You've kind of skipped to the next exercise, which is, whoops, that's not it. Sorry, I'm jumping around. You say, we'd like to be working with you. And then, oh, my slides are messed up. That's why. Okay. I've actually skipped the next exercise in the slides. That's why. Sorry, so you've done exactly the right thing, Jeff. So you state your value proposition and why they should be working together, but clearly state that you'd like to be working with them, okay? Anybody else want to, or give commentary on that?
No, that makes sense. And again, remembering to start with it being about them.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically you just jumped in and said, blah, 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 this is me. This is what I do, right? It's a great ambush. And honestly, if you were selling, like I said, if you were selling chicken, that would be the best thing to do. Hey, Jeff, our chicken is fresher and it's cheaper than any other supplier that you might be working with. And that's why that's why I stopped stocking today, right? Talk about them, work that in, right? Say, I know your company is doing this. This is the work I've done. There's a natural fit. Can we talk, you know, what's your process to have us consider, you know, working together? Okay. Anybody else want to throw one out? Of the dozen or so people?
I wanted to
yeah,
add,
Cornelia?
I'm trying, if I can talk.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Yep.
who's speaking? I can't
I'm
see
trying
from
to
my
get onto
screen.
my phone. I know that I don't have my video on. The company that I freelance for, sometimes they had someone do a LinkedIn, compose some LinkedIn invitation to write to people like, I'd like to add you to my network and show you how it can add value with this software, something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, people use LinkedIn all the time to do outreach. If you were to read a book on the best practices around reaching out through LinkedIn, what everybody suggests is to make the link and establish a dialogue of some kind, and then to talk about doing business. I've been in this situation, I don't know if you have, and honestly, I used to make this mistake myself when LinkedIn was new, is I would link to somebody and they linked to me, hooray! And then I'd reach out and my message would be, hi, John, you know, we're the Northwest's largest supplier of industrial training services. And, you know, how would you feel about us coming in to present, right? And it just feels like, oh, that person asked me out because they know my parents are really rich. They just talked to me because they wanted something from me. So they're not interested in me, they're interested in my company. So what I would suggest that you do is in a situation like that is first of all, reach out and establish a dialogue. Write to them and say, hey, thanks for linking to me. By the way, really like what you're doing in this area of your business. And then they'll write back and say, thank you. And then you can write back to say, by the way, you know, our company does this. we'd like to be working with your company. Can you tell me about your process for considering new suppliers? So you've taken the same 3-step process, you admire them, you found a reason for you to be working together, and now you're asking them about their process. And it's pretty hard at that point for them to just, I mean, they could ignore you, but they'll usually tell you what that is. They'll be, you know, call Judy Jones, call Bob Brown, whatever, and they're the right person for you to talk to. Does that help? I don't know who was just speaking.
Rachel, she just wrote in the chat.
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm glad, Rachel. Thanks.
Sense,
Okay,
yes.
good.
I found that introduction meanwhile and pasted it in so you can have a look.
Yeah, she pasted some text in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take a look. I'll have access to the chat after. I'll go through. I'll read everybody's comments.
Okay, so you're saying just to first have the introduction if someone's adding me, because usually people add me to the network is because of what I advertised, and it's usually related to the interest in the product. So first to start a conversation to see if they're really interested
Start a conversation,
in it.
right? Yeah, start a conversation.
Okay. And then send an introduction like that.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
And after you have the conversation going, to send an introduction about the work and stuff like that, what we can do together.
Yeah, there needs to be a dialogue. It makes it a little bit nicer, and it's the difference between talking to somebody and then asking them out on a date, and just walking up to a stranger and saying, "Hi, you want to go out with me sometime? I'm a great guy. You should come out with me, right? Let's go for dinner. Let's get married. Let's have kids." Right? You need to have a dialogue going, right? So that's what I would suggest. But having said that, and more in answer to the question earlier about COVID, yeah, this approach of expressing an interest, explaining why that interest is there, what the commonality is between your companies, and then asking them about their process, that'll work on LinkedIn too. Okay. I was wondering, does anybody want to read out one of their another statement like Jeff did? Anybody want to try in real life, hear how that sounds, and maybe get feedback from me and other people on the call?
This is Sherry. I'm happy to. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Sherry.
Awesome. Thanks.
Fire away.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. So a bit of a modified version. Appreciate your impact here. And I need to protect the innocent, so I'm going to leave, I'm going to refer to the clients as X and their issue as Y, something like that.
Sure.
So Joe, I saw your great presentation last week, and I was really inspired by your company's focus on quality and safety. We're very much aligned there. I've been commercializing FDA regulated products for over 30 years. And I'd really like to be considered for work with your organization. How might I go about doing that?
Well, you've everything except the last sentence was great. Okay. And by the way, I know who you are. I don't know if you're on the call right at the beginning, but I went through.
I was, and I sent you a chat. I said, "Thanks for noticing me."
Yes, I know. I won't say the name of your firm.
It's all good. I'm also the one that does the customized packages, and that's not working. So I genuinely appreciate the no ego in this. I just want to get better. So I genuinely appreciate your comments, David.
Okay, good. How are we all doing for time? We only have a few minutes left, so let me point out why 90% of what you just said was right, and then focus on the 10% that wasn't. Okay.
Sure.
So you got to the end, and what was the last thing you said? You said
it was a bit of a riff. I said I'd really be interested in working with your organization. How might I go about doing that?
Right. How might I go about doing that? Okay. That's you. How might I go about doing that? Right. That's very different than asking them about them. Okay. So if you say everything you just said, and then you say, would you mind telling me about your process for considering new suppliers? You know, we've never worked together. We're one of the biggest in this area. I think we could add value. We'd like to be considered. What is your process for considering new suppliers? Or what's the best way for me to introduce myself to your team?
That's
Now
perfect.
you're at it. Now it's not like a yes or no question anymore. You're asking them, and usually they go, well, you would have to do this, right? And most of the time you can tell nobody's ever asked them that before
Yeah, I
about the
appreciate
internal
that.
workings,
It's
right?
better.
But they work hard to come up with an answer. And then once they say, well, you have to come in dressed as a clown and do a tap dance. And you say, terrific. How would I, yeah, how would I go about scheduling that tap dance in a clown suit? And they go, well, call me and I'll set it up. And they give you their card, and now you have a conversation going, because when you contact them, you're not saying, hi, we met at a trade show, you gave me a card. You're saying, hi, I wanted to continue our conversation and see if I could set up a time to bring my clown suit in and tap dance for your team. Right? You see, there's a dialogue going. Okay.
Absolutely.
So you're transcending that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So we're about to go overtime, which is fine with me. And I don't know about Mac. I mean, Mac's got a pretty busy schedule. So what I'll do is I'm going to make a couple of offers to you all now. And Mac's looking confused because we didn't talk about this, and that's fine. So here's what I'll tell you. Just by thumbs up, like, was this useful to you? It sounds like what I'm hearing is that it was useful. Bennett, thank you. I've seen thumbs up. I talked about how this is a subset of a seminar called One More Good Client. It costs $500 to participate, and there's about 10 hours, depending on what day of the week that you do it. As I explained earlier, I used to do this in person. I'd go to a law firm and I'd set up and I'd spend a day or two there working with their staff. Because of COVID, I can't do this anymore. I've had to learn how to teach online. And this is literally the first time I've done this. This is the first time I've stood in front of this backdrop and addressed a group. I would like to practice and rehearse the One More Good Client seminars. And if you would like to take the $500 seminar, I will let you take it for free on a few conditions. Okay, first of all, I have to know that you're going to come. Excuse me. I have to know that you're going to come and you're going to participate. It might be like 4 evenings, 2 hours a night, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It might be a few blocks of time during the day. There's 3 time slots that I've made available. And there's one that's a Saturday and Sunday over the next month. One Saturday, one Sunday, 2 consecutive days. So if you'd like to do it, first of all, you have to promise me you're going to come and participate fully, have dialogue with your colleagues in the presentation. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll split you out into groups so that you can practice, rehearse on each other. So that's number one. Number two is, if you like it, you have to give me a recommendation. And let me see, if you go to the One More Good website, you'll find 2 very nice recommendations from past students who've done it in person. And what I'm looking for is a number of people to give me an attributable quote. So that can't be, Jim G, it's at a such and such company, really liked the seminar. I want you to say, let's say it's Rachel or Jeffrey Simons from such and such a company said this. So you have to give me an attributable quote to use, assuming you liked it. And then if you didn't like it, you have to tell me what went wrong. And you also have to be patient with me because I'm debugging this. I may have lighting issues. I may lose my place. You saw today there was 1 slide missing and some words transposed. So if you would like to do the One More Good Client seminar in its entirety at no charge, I would invite you to do that. I'm looking at Mac's face. He's going, oh my God, that's an amazing offer. It is pretty good. But again, I get something out of this. I get the practice that I need so I can be comfortable charging money. And I've been doing this for years, just not remotely. And number 2 is, so I get that, I get the recommendation. And the one thing that I'm going to tell you is I want you to give me a $50 deposit so that I know you're coming. You can't just say you're coming. Remember, there were over 30 people who signed up for today's program, but only about a dozen of you showed up. So I'm going to ask for a $50 deposit. If you come and participate to all the sessions, unless you tell me why you have to be absent that day, that's fine. Participate in all the sessions, give me a recommendation. At the end, then I will give you your $50 back. If you don't give me a recommendation, or alternatively, don't tell me why you didn't like it, then I won't give you the $50 back. I'll donate it to a charity of my choice. I just want to make sure that you're going to be there. Does that seem reasonable? So if you're interested, drop me a line. I will put, since we're out of time today, send me feedback, and you can write to me at, whoops, holy cow, look at that. That didn't work. You can write to me at David Selch at servicereboot.com or One More Good Client. Okay, that's the place to go. Okay, and just let me know. The classes start, they're all through this coming month. All right. Any questions before we go, Mac, or do you have goodbyes to say?
I just dropped your email in the chat there.
Okay, thank you.
No, that does it for me as well. Yeah, thanks, David. This is super cool. And
free is my
Thank you very
favorite
much.
price.
yeah.
Hey,
I
hi,
hope
Rachel.
people
Thank you. This was useful.
Thank you. It's very insightful. I needed to hear that.
Thank you very
Awesome.
much. It's good to hear.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Thank you, Bennett. Thank you, everybody. I will stay on the line with Mac's permission for a bit if people have questions. But I hope you all have more important things to go do, clients to see, and quotations to write, and business to close. So, oh, there's Deborah. Hi, Deborah. Deborah Kim has been quiet, and I now get to see her smiling face. Good. And Cornelia, thank you for your input today. So I'll hang out for a few minutes, and if you have questions, I'll let you facilitate that. Let me just see, Mac. I have my screen set up. I'm going to open the chat box. There we
Cornelia actually want to ask in the chat. I think let me see here. It was about the trend of selling subscriptions of products.
Mm-hmm.
Cornelia,
Yeah.
do you want to ask that question?
Oh, Cornelia, yeah, please.
Yeah, it was when you were going through the slides of the theoretical part, the difference between service and product. I was thinking that all these smart marketing companies advised by smart marketers, they're putting out subscription. You can order whatever, your beauty product, your Pampers, your olive oil quantity on a subscription basis, and then they pretend they deliver a service, which is advising you on weight loss and whatever, but actually you're locked in as buying the product. So my question is, are these like already service companies, or are these still product companies with smart marketing?
That is a great question. And I don't know if you understand this, but I'm continuously doing research around questions like this, right? I'm not just a practitioner. So I'm not just a salesman by trade. I'm a theoretician. I become a theoretician so that I can sell more. And I do have an answer to that question, okay? There's the issue of, hold on 1 minute. I'm gonna do something here just to see if I can show you some stuff, all right? I'm gonna take, can you still see my screen? Or is it gone?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yep.
so I am going to do this. This is because I don't have a blackboard behind me, which I would have in the classroom, right? X, A, S. Oop. So this is X. Bear with me 1 second, folks. X, A, S, like software as a service. So we're talking about, this now takes us into the realm of software as a service or anything as a service, right? So how does, if you make an agreement with Amazon to send you Tide laundry detergent every month on schedule, right? They even had, there was a button that you could push. It was a Wi-Fi button that they were giving away where you put that next, you'd stick it to your washing machine, you could push the button and you could get them to send, they'd send you what you needed. So the question is how do you offer a tangible good as a service? And the way you do it is you combine the product with a service that makes it more valuable. Hang on, I'm going to write that down. It does one of a few things. It makes it more valuable. It makes it easier to buy, and that would include money issues. Okay, so one of those three things, and you add a service. So you add a service that does one of those three things. It makes it more valuable, it makes it easier to buy, or it solves a pricing issue. So for example, I could, let me give you an example. So I have right here, my family plays a lot of board games. I just started to reach here. We've got, see, I'm not lying, this is Quirkle. This is a board game. I'm surrounded here in this office by board games that my family and I play. So the question is, can I offer a board game as a service, right? What does that even mean? And in fact, there are coffee shops in Winnipeg, and you probably have one in your town, where it's like going into a library of board games. The lines are walled with bookshelves, the walls are lined with bookshelves, and instead of having books, what you have are games. And you go and for whatever it is, $3 an hour, or maybe you have to buy a certain amount of coffee and Danish while you're there, but you can go and you can play their games. And they even have other services on top of that. So they call it the games concierge, right? Who comes, and if there's a game that you don't know how to play, they'll teach you how to play it right on the spot. So what they've done is I now no longer need to purchase a copy of Settlers of Catan. Historically, what I would do is I would buy the tangible game, and in my house, I would make coffee and I'd put out Danish and I'd have my friends over, right? And that was the product, and I did all of that stuff. But their business, the way they are now offering board games as a service, is they have added services. What are the services? They will bring you coffee in Danish. They will provide you with a nice, well-lit room in which to play. They will have somebody explain the game to you. And what you'll find is almost any product that you can think of can be turned into a service doing one or all of these three steps. For example, car leasing. There's a service, right? What is the difference between leasing a vehicle on a 3-year lease and buying a car and selling it back to the dealership after 3 years? One is a product, right? I bought a car. The other is a service. I've leased something, but it's the same vehicle. Like, where does the difference lie? And the answer is, well, if I buy a car, I have to apply for financing, right? I have to have a good enough credit rating to do that. And then, you know, so I take it over. But when I lease a car, somebody else is dealing with that. In fact, the car company actually still owns the car. I don't own the car in a lease. The leasing company, they buy the car for me, and I just pay them for it. And then I don't have to worry about selling it at the end. That's the leasing company's problem. So what are the services that a leasing company provides? Well, they make it more valuable to me by handling the financing issues. And they make it easier for me to buy it because I don't have to worry about selling it in 3 years. Anybody here like selling cars? I hate like selling a used car. People come to your house and they want to test. It's a nightmare to sell a used car, right? So that's a service that turns a product, a car, into a service. Does that help, Cornelia?
Yes, perfect.
I'm not sure exactly what it is that what product it is that you're offering now, but
Just, you know, came through my mind, you know, that there's a lot of subscription business going on in the market, and
that's how you move it. So if the subscription is you say, okay, somebody can go to the store and they can buy a box of Oreos, or they can sit at home and the Oreos will be delivered to their home periodically, right? Then it's becoming more valuable by making it easier to buy. You don't have to go to the store. You also it makes it more valuable because you don't have to worry about running out of Oreos, right? If I look in the Oreo box, oh my God, there's only one left. There's a chance that I may be Oreo list sometime this afternoon. And the front doorbell rings and it's more Oreos, right? That makes it more valuable to me. It makes it easier to buy. So in terms of turning something into subscription, that's kind of the way to do it. Does that make sense? Can anybody think of an exception to that? Speak up and I'll explain why I'm asking. Can you think of an exception to what I've just said? Something where that wouldn't work? Nobody, right? Okay, excellent. So here's what I'll tell you. What's in Service Reboot? This is what I learned and knew and advised people on up until the time I wrote the book. This idea of how do you turn a product into a service, that's a new development for me. How many people are on the call, Mac? Like 13 or something? How many are on the
about 12.
12? And me. So there are now 13 people in the world who know about my approach to turning a product into a service. Okay, this is something new. I haven't published it anywhere. I've helped some clients, right? But that'll be in the next book, I guess. So, okay.
Can I just ask you, what do you mean by money issues? So I understand what it is. It makes it more valuable and it makes it easier to buy. But what is the money issue? You solve like money issues for the client, which is like the you don't have to apply for the credit as a car salesman. I will.
Sure. Okay, so there are let's continue the car analogy. There are some car dealerships where they will provide financing for anybody.
Okay.
And they actually specialize, and they charge higher interest rates. So really the only people that go to them are people with bad credit. Okay. So they build in that financing as part of their fundamental offering. So while they might look like a car dealership, what they really are is a car financing agency, right? And in fact, if you look at a bunch of them, you'll see some of them even say that in their names. They don't say we sell cars here. They'll say we're, guaranteed approval. We're the guaranteed approval car company. And so what they've done is maybe they're self-financing. So maybe they're wherever the money is coming from, they're self-financing. They provide that credit, and it's part of their package, and that is a service they offer. Instead of needing $20,000, I need $250 a month for the next 10 years, right? So arranging the money in the situation, that's how that's broken down, okay? Does that help, Cornelia? Yeah, thumbs up? Thank you, okay. Other questions? Mac, how are we doing? Mac has disappeared from the screen.
Yeah, he just said he has to run for a call.
Okay. All right, so it's now 20 past. Should we go for another 10 minutes or so? And then we'll say goodbye. And what I'll say is, if you want to contact me, please do. I'll give you a half an hour of free chatting for free. Okay? How's that? Half an hour of free consulting time to anybody who wants to reach out directly. Okay? Questions? Anybody else? Well, the next 10 minutes. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Mac is gone. He says hopping in another call. Okay, so if you have a question, type it into the chat space, which I can now see. I know there's like a question or raise your hand thing, which I cannot see. So if you have a question, please type it into the chat area. No more questions. Okay. Lunchtime is early for me today. All right. Thank you, everybody, very much. And thank you for participating in our call. After this, we're going to do the draw. We gave away a few books during the meeting, and those will come from Mac. He'll be shipping them out. I sent him a small box of books a few weeks ago. So that's basically it. And I'll ask you to do one more thing. If you enjoyed the call today, if you got something out of it, make a post to LinkedIn. Tell people, recommend recommend my site, recommend the One More Good Client seminar, and that would be a big help for me. Okay.